Please welcome President and CEO of the South Carolina Bankers Association, Fred Green.
Good morning. There's an old adage that lightning never strikes the same place twice, but I'm here this morning to say that sometimes it does. 2 years ago, I had the tremendous honor of introducing then Senate Banking Committee ranking member Tim Scott to this audience, and this morning I have that same honor of introducing him again, but this time as chairman. 2 years ago, when I talked about Senator Scott, it was more about his story that helped shape him to become the leader that he is today. After he spoke to us, there were dozens of bankers who told me afterwards how impressed they were with the senator. Some even said that if he chose to run for president, they would enthusiastically support his campaign. Let's fast forward. We all know there was a very crowded Republican primary. Early in the process, Senator Scott realized that he could do more for our country by coalescing his support around former President Trump and then face off against him on the campaign trail. Senator Scott supported President Trump not only with his words, but through his action. He went across the country from battleground state to battleground state, working to elect President Trump. After the election, there was a strong expectation that Senator Scott would have his pick of cabinet positions. Now, it makes complete sense because Senator Scott is such a dynamic leader and he has a strong understanding of the banking and financial services industry. He and I had a brief conversation about his plans, and he told me he thought that he could do better for the American people as chairman of Senate Banking Committee. Of course, as bankers, we all understand the importance of that role, but the general public may not have a full understanding of its importance. We know in a lot of ways it can be even more impactful than a cabinet role. 2 years ago in my introduction, I quoted something Senator Scott had said early in his career. He said his goal in life is to positively affect the lives of over 1 billion people. And I asked myself, how do you do that? 1 billion people. Now I understand. One way to have a profound impact on hundreds of millions of people's lives is to draft and shepherd legislation through the Senate that would allow every banker in this country to better serve their customers and positively impact their communities. Senator Scott, I now see why you chose to serve as chairman of the Senate Banking Committee. Through your leadership, you will enlist us to help you positively impact the lives of over 1 billion people. Please join me in welcoming the chairman of Senate Banking Committee, a fellow South Carolinian who's my hero and good friend, Senator Tim Scott, who will be joined in conversation by ABA's Executive Vice President for Congressional Relations and Legislative Affairs, Kirsten Sutton. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was trying to figure out who Fred was talking about.
We're all so thrilled that you are here. Chairman Scott is especially a thrill to call you chairman. So we are excited to have the opportunity to do that. In addition to your chairmanship of the Senate Banking Committee, you are also chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, another really big job. Can you explain to our bankers what that means?
Sure. Before I do that, how's Bobby doing?
Oh, so he's doing great. Thank you. Bobby's my 10-year-old son who met Chairman Scott at a political event, like I think 5 years ago, and thinks that you're best friends. So he will be thrilled that you asked.
Tell him I said what's up.
I will.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. NRC. So NRC is basically the arm of the Republican Party in the Senate that helps recruit candidates, raise $400 million, and hopefully keep us in the majority.
Did you say 400 million?
Yeah. Can a brother get a dollar? Okay.
Not a
Two, actually. To be honest with you, we need some help. But so it's a fascinating job. I just got married 8 months ago. My wife.
Congratulations.
Thank you. My wife said, "You gonna do what? Isn't being a senator enough? Being chairman enough?" I'm like, yeah, it is actually. And then this job, though, really, if you think about what Fred said, my mission to positively impact the lives of 1 billion people. And in order to do that, we have to leave the country and/or impact multiple generations of Americans. And if you're going to do that, one of the ways to do it is to make sure that you focus your time and attention on attracting the kind of principle-centered leaders that will look beyond party and look beyond partisanship and look to the American people and figure out how do we solve problems for generations. And I think that's the NRSC gives me a chance to do that as well as anything else. We will attract some really cool leaders that will have a significant impact on this nation for generations to come. And so I will say that job pays zero. You get a lot of people cussing at you, and when they win, they get the credit. When they lose, I get the blame. So it's a wonderful job.
Sounds like leadership, yeah.
Yes.
Well, incredibly consequential positions for both. I think that goal of impacting 1 billion people, when you think about shaping banking policy for consumers across the country, but also really shaping what the future of Congress looks like and congressional leaders, it's incredible, incredible opportunity for you.
Exciting.
We're so thrilled. So as I mentioned, we're excited to be able to call you chairman.
Thank you, ma'am.
You have a ranking member that we're very familiar with. Elizabeth Warren has a lot of positions around the banking industry. I was wondering if you could share a little bit what it's been like for you having her as your ranking member and any peek behind the curtain into the dynamics of that relationship.
I like the way you said that. She has a lot of opinions around the banking community. That's true. Yeah. Let us pray.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, we know.
Hallelujah.
We know.
I can feel some Pentecostal over here. For sure, we need to pray. Now, I will say that this is all the fun I get to have, y'all. So y'all can play along with me, or I'm going to have fun without you if necessary. Just tell you the truth. So if you think about having Sherrod Brown as the chairman of the banking committee, the one thing I can tell you was I was always in the dark. Mm-hmm. With Elizabeth, believe it or not, while we are philosophically disjointed forever, she doesn't surprise me very often. And I find her to be strong, smart, wrong, but also engaging.
Yes.
And she's constantly calling me about an issue. So in an unusual way, her ranking member status I find refreshing. And she does her homework, and that makes me a better leader. It makes me a better student because she is always on her A game. And if you give her a little space,
jump right in there.
She'll get you. So
Yeah.
From my perspective, she's making me a better chairman, and it makes the committee on the right stronger and more committed. And it also requires everybody to show up because if there's a vote, we need all Republicans present.
Yep.
And it helps me gather the team in a powerful yet positive way. And frankly, it also requires me to spend more time talking to her team, so to speak, as well.
Yeah, she's a very effective communicator.
Absolutely.
Your first markup was really fascinating. So the Senate Banking Committee has already moved with what feels like near lightning speed. You had to get organized. You're doing noms. Chairman Scott just marked up the Genius Act. This is a Senate version of stablecoin legislation. And we watched with interest as you picked up 5 Democrats on the committee. So off to a very, very bipartisan start. Notice that the ranking member wasn't supportive of that legislation, but that you're already kind of flexing that ability to bridge gaps across the aisle. Do you see any opportunities, or what other opportunities do you see for bipartisanship?
Well, I say one of the things I say on the stablecoin legislation, if you believe in democratization, if you believe that we want to create more opportunities for more Americans to live their version of the American dream, that requires for us to lower the cost point and make access easier, especially if you grew up as I did in a single-parent household, mired in poverty. And so I look at opportunities for us to bring a new wave of success into the poorest communities. And frankly, one of the things that we oftentimes think of being synonymous with the American dream is home ownership. And while we are philosophically disjointed, Elizabeth and I, on many issues, the one area where I see a lot of common ground is on seeing the problem. We see the same problem very consistently. We have different approaches to the solution, but on the housing issue, I think we have a chance to get a bipartisan piece of legislation to the president's desk and sign into law, because she's willing to work with me. She says the bigger the better. And I actually embrace that philosophy that in order for us to get something accomplished, it's not going to be a philosophically pure, I see Michael out there, a philosophically pure way of doing things on the right. It's going to take all hands on deck, and the best way for us to have success on a housing markup is for us to stop thinking in Republican versus Democrat terms, to start thinking about the fact that the average American in this country still sees the dream as home ownership. And if we're going to fulfill that dream, it's going to require for me to listen to my friends on the other side and to welcome their answers to this really persistent challenge, particularly for first-time home buyers. And she has some really interesting ideas. One being, well, let's create more incentives for local jurisdictions to increase their housing supply. And by doing so, they'll get more federal resources. And by not doing so, they'll get fewer federal dollars. I kind of like that concept. She and John Kennedy is one of the more fascinating humans on the committee.
I always love hearing what he has to say.
He is funny. He has said some things I can't say on stage, but it's really, really funny. So they are in agreement on this incentive-based approach to solving some of the housing crisis that we see around the country, which is fantastic for the American people when we, the elected officials, realize that we serve them because we work for them, and it's not whether you're Republican or Democrats, whether you're solving the issues that are persistent in the American kitchen table conversation. And this is one of the areas where I really expect us to make serious progress in the Senate, and hopefully we'll have a House companion legislation that will allow the president to sign into law.
We really appreciate how you talk about, and really, I think, have identified shared values in those areas where you are seeking bipartisanship. You're focusing on the policy and the values, recognizing that there are sometimes different approaches for how we get there.
Absolutely.
But it seems to be working for you so far.
Knock on
So
wood.
we have a lot of topics to cover, but before we move on from Genius, what do you see as the path forward? I assume that the Senate floor will be taking up that legislation.
Yes.
Do you think there will be a formal conference with the House?
Yeah, so one of the things I'll say is having French Hill, I think y'all heard from him earlier.
We did.
Really smart guy, really, really smart guy. I think he graduated cum laude. I graduated thank you laude. So we got both ends of the spectrum represented. But one of the things I've done is I put together a bicameral working group, and he and I meet on a regular basis. I think it's important for us to define common ground before it gets to the floor of the House or the Senate. And we met on Friday to discuss the path forward on the stablecoin legislation, the Genius Act. And I had my digital asset subcommittee chair, Cynthia Lummis, with me, and I had the lead sponsor of the bill, Bill Hagerty, talking on behalf of us, and he had Brian Stiles, the digital asset subcommittee chair, with him as well. And so we had this conversation about what reality looks like going forward. And the good news is when you have those meetings before it hits the floor of the House, it allows us to solve a lot of the problems, and it allows for speed and momentum to work for us, not against us. And our rules of the Senate are very different than the rules of the House.
Right.
And so it requires me to have Democrat support. 5 Democrats on the committee is really helpful. But this is going to be a bipartisan success that will happen before the summer, and I think it could happen before the end of May.
It's moving so quickly. 5 Democrats in the Senate, I think 6 in the House. So this one's becoming law. Your staff has been amazing, and we appreciate all of the changes that you all have made based on recommendations from the banking industry. So thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Another really important policy topic for us where we want to thank you is overdraft, the overdraft CRA. So Chairman Scott and Chairman Hill, as you all know, joined together in introducing that critically important legislation. You moved it quickly across the Senate floor, which we love to see, just discharge petition. Hopefully that will be taken up in the House soon. But can you share a little bit about why you made that a priority for the committee?
Well, I think sometimes I oftentimes say if you can't put it on a bumper sticker, it's hard for some people to get it. And it's easy to talk about junk fees and how important it is to create access points for the American people, particularly poor people. I look at the overdraft fee as a way of paying for free checking. I think about the revenue streams that come into a financial institution, and they're going to make decisions what to do with it. And so when you have price fixing from the federal government, you actually are eliminating access to products for the people who can least afford it. And so I think it was the New York Fed that did a study that showed that if you're interested in financial inclusion, every time you cap fees and jimmy the system, so to speak, you actually carve out of the financial system the poorest Americans, people that grew up like I did. And so while overdraft fees takes longer than 30 seconds to explain why this is a good thing to the average person in the country, once they get it, they're like, oh, duh, that makes a lot of sense. If you don't have time to explain it, then they just say, Tim Scott really hates people. I have a neighbor who said that on Facebook, and I was like, wow, I didn't know I hated all people. I like my mama. Yeah, so it's just sometimes you don't understand the unintended consequence of talking about the elimination of a fee, because fees, i.e. revenue, actually funds the very things we say we want.
We could listen to you talk all day.
Well, I recommend against that, because sooner or later I'm going to take up an offering, so you want to leave before that happens.
So in keeping, so this is
thank you, IBC, for always paying that offering. See all my friends on the front row there. I'm coming back to San Antonio. He's like, run. Go ahead.
Speaking of the CFPB,
yes, ma'am.
Overdraft rule.
Do we have to speak about the CFPB anymore?
We do. I mean, we would love to
nauseous.
not, but yes. Just thinking about, we've long had concerns with the Bureau since its creation in Dodd-Frank many years ago. It's gone back and forth between political parties. I was chief of staff there in the last administration. We've got new leadership there now.
Yes.
How are you thinking about oversight of the agency at this point?
Smaller the better. So everything we can do to shrink the size of the CFPB, the better off the average consumer is. For an agency that's supposed to protect the consumers, it made it very hard on consumers, and especially hard on small businesses. And so I love the fact that the first thing that Secretary Bessent did was become the director of the CFPB for a few minutes, and then he has vote in place for another few minutes, and then we're going to have a permanent person sometime soon. But what it allowed us to do, and give a shout out to my staff led by Catherine, who's done a really good job, we're looking at putting in the reconciliation vehicle, either capping the amount of money that comes to the CFPB. I'd love to have a bipartisan board over the CFPB.
So would we.
Anybody for that? That's good. Yeah. Only 43%. That's unfortunate. You need to talk to the 57%. So I think everything we can do to move the CFPB into the normal congressional process from a budgeting perspective and oversight is better for the American consumer.
Right.
And for me, I don't think about banking from a philosophical standpoint. I think about banking as access points for credit, for resources, for home ownership, for small businesses. And I start at the ground and I build my way up, because that's what changed my life. And so I take that worldview into what I do, and I try to make sure that we don't forget that. And when you get in the way of that, because you have so many alphabet soup agencies doing the same thing, it makes it harder for y'all, but it makes it harder for the people that you serve to get access to the very products and services they need.
You all have been doing a lot of work on nominees for the administration. I know that's been taking up a lot of time. We are all very curious about Jonathan McKernan, who's been nominated to lead the CFPB more permanently. Do you have any visibility into when that might be moving forward?
Well, I say the word is, it is imminent. Now, imminent in the Senate might mean forever, but typically means in the next month or two.
Okay.
I think there is some consternation, honestly, in the system, because a part of the challenge is we wanted to shrink the CFPB down to the right size. And I think we wanted to get as much of that work done before we had a permanent guy come in and take it over. And I do think we are at the point where it's time to move forward. I also think Leader Thune is ready for more noms to get through. I think we'll be done with CFPB sometime probably early May.
Well, that is music to our ears. As you know, we desperately need relief on 1071.
Yes.
Thank you for your support for the 1071 CRA, which unfortunately we talked about this morning. President Biden vetoed that.
Yes.
Our members need relief. We are really concerned about the impact on their ability to do small business lending.
Absolutely.
So any attention from the committee on legislative messaging solutions, we totally appreciate the staunch supporter you've been of our industry and our customers on 1071.
Well, I think the good news is both Bessent and Voigt looked at 1071 and said we need to purge this process out. There's enough burden on banks already from 1,000 different directions. So to the extent that we can eliminate things that are either duplicative or unnecessary, we ought to do so. In 1071, gender, race, and the whole 9 yards being populated into your system so that you can share it with us.
Right. It's wild.
Elimination.
Needing to know someone's sexual orientation in order to make them alone feels very intrusive.
Yeah, I just want to know what your FICO is. Can you pay it back? I mean, I'm a simpleton. Obviously.
Same. You also, alongside your stablecoin legislation, moved legislation called the FIRM Act.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk a little bit about why that was important to you?
Yeah, for me, the FIRM Act really is redlining in a different way. And as a guy who grew up in the South who understands redlining and the challenges of making decisions based on what you look like as opposed to who you are, I think is abhorrent. To do so based on partisan affiliation and or businesses that are disfavored with a certain political party, that's just un-American. And everything we stand for that is antithetical to the things that we stand for, the values that we should hold. And so the FIRM Act basically says, let's get rid of this notion of reputational risk. And the good news is a big shout out to the acting comptroller OCC, Rodney Hood, who took that issue on and sent me the little note over the weekend and several weeks ago. I was at the movies with my mom, took her to the movies on weekends. We've been doing that for like 30 years. We were watching Captain America, and I get this call from Rodney Hood. I was like, Rodney, I'm in the movie, man. What you need? He's like, I'm going to get rid of the reputational risk. I said, someone say thank you very much for that. I had to sit down in the movie theater and start keep watching Captain America. But at the end of the day, when you see things like that move forward, and then you see the FDIC do it, and I'm hopeful that with Mickey Bowman taking over the supervision, vice chair of the supervision, I'm hoping that the Fed will see that as wisdom as well. But if not, the legislation is moving through the process, heading to the floor of the Senate. I'm going to look for ways to get some bipartisan support for it as well. But this is what allows for us to stop discriminating against people for whatever reason that they want to do so. And
ABA strongly supports this legislation. We believe that banks are best suited to make business decisions that make sense for them and their risk appetite and their expertise, and that it is not the role of regulators to be pressuring banks out of providing banking services to legally operating businesses. So thank you for that legislation. We support it. Do you think there's any chance it could be bipartisan?
I think there is. Actually, frankly, reputational risk is a place where there are Republicans and Democrats that support it. I think Choke Point 1.0 was a very different conversation, which was very left versus right. But the fact of the matter is, especially when you think about democratization, and you think about who voted on the left for the Stablecoins Genius Act, also Brooks. You saw Warnock was really close. I think we can get him. Gallego was there as well. Those of us who understand the world from that perspective, I think, look at it and say, okay, this makes a lot of sense. And then reputational risk is in the same universe. And I think there's a way for us to get some Democrats to say, all right, we're going to move forward and give you a shot at this.
That's great. We'd love to help. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll need your help, actually.
As the Genius Act or any banking legislation is moving to the Senate floor, we know that there is appetite to append legislation. So this is something we're always dealing with in the Senate. Lots of amendments, lots of different policies being added to things. You know, we don't love price controls. We don't love government mandates. And as any legislation moving through your committee, maybe moving to the floor, we're always wary that some of those amendments could try to be attached. Yes. Do you have any advice for us on how to be effective in keeping unrelated legislation off of things like the Genius Act?
I think you guys have done a really good job of advocating on behalf of the people that you serve. And when you do that, you actually are in a position where your words and your power and the stories of your consumers, it resonates. And so if you're in a blue district, talking to your Congress members and your senators in a blue state, very helpful, frankly. One of the things that we, most of us as elected officials, left and right, recognize is that we work for the American people. And when the American people come in numbers, we pay attention. When you call our phones, we pay attention. But when you show up, whether it's at our district offices or state offices or in Washington, D.C., it makes a difference. So never underestimate the value of your presence on behalf of your consumers in our offices on the issues that you care passionately about. But share their stories. It can make a huge difference.
So I think that's really timely advice, given we have 1,400 bankers here in town. This is our biggest fly-in of the year. What other advice do you have for our members for how to be effective in meetings? And maybe another way to ask the question is, do you see people often making mistakes when they're coming in trying to encourage you to do something or not do something? What should we avoid and what should we lean into to be effective advocates? Well,
for some reason, Chick-fil-A motivates most of us, so bring Chick-fil-A when you come, number one. Number two, I would say, so I think, and it makes sense, right? You guys are bankers. Y'all are really smart, and you think very clearly. People make decisions, however, from their emotions. And so when you're telling a story that you process the story, but you don't feel the story, it's not that effective. I mean, it might work on the 20% of our members. I think the vast majority of us are moved by a story driven by facts, not just facts. Mm-hmm. And we oftentimes hear like this will cost the industry X number of dollars. Well, if someone can sell junk fees, this big bucket of junk fees, obviously that number might not work. And frankly, getting some of the issues, CRAs, to the floor of the Senate, the things that get in the way are Republicans and Democrats, not just one or the other, because if you don't understand the story, you think that fee or that amount of money is doing something you don't want to do. So Republicans and Democrats come to that conclusion. So the better the story, connecting it to the facts is the way you move senators.
We appreciate there's so much alignment with your agenda and our values. So thank you for that. What can we do? Final question. What can we do to help you?
Well, I think the more you guys communicate with us, the more effective we will be on your behalf. I mean, in fact, frankly, we're going to disagree on some issues. Obviously not many, but some issues. But the more we hear from you all, the better off we are. We have a great staff, and frankly, most of my staff are smarter than I. I try to hire people who are smarter than me. It's not that hard to do when you graduate. Thank you, Lottie. But at the end of the day, I think that your engagement is really important. Do not underestimate your presence in this city as a group today. You will make a huge impact. And then make sure you follow up 2 or 3 times with the people that you feel that connection. And many of you have great connections already, but don't think saying it once, we hear it, because we hear 1,000 things when you leave and 1,000 things before you get there. So spaced repetition is the mother of creation. We've got to hear it several times, so don't get tired of telling the same story a few times.
That is great advice, and we remember, make the ask. This is part of our follow-up, that when we have a concrete ask and we're able to go back to the office a couple more times and increase those touch points, this is exactly what the senator is saying. So thank you so much. All please join me in thanking Chairman Scott.
Thank you.